manifold pressure should be a lot higher because you got exhaust gases going in the manifold. And it's not really, if you hit quick subtract, keep doing that, keep doing that. There's really not a difference here. So it tells me your 401 code is a restriction, or the valve's just not opening, one of the two. So, no, you can't say that. You have to go in there. If you put it,
we need time to pull the EGR valve.
Well, I gotta do some inspection. You get to inspect. So the EGR valve just opens, exhaust flow goes to the intake. There's a pipe, right? Mm-hmm. So we need to see if there's a restriction somewhere, like a piece of carbon is clogging the intake ports, which is most likely we're going to find. When you pull off these intakes, the ports are probably all going to be clogged. There's 4 ports on an intake. It's possible where that tube goes into the intake, it's a chunk of carbon right there. But what I normally see in these, when you pull the intake, the ports are all clogged. So you just pull off the intake and inspect. But one thing we should probably do, if you pull the EGR valve off, let's see if it actually moves, that pintle from this test right here. Let's see if we can see it moving, because it should open up and go back. If that moves, we know the EGR valve's good. That tells me, hey, we need to get time to pull this intake off. If the EGR valve does not move, like you said, we need to go, we confirm the EGR is bad, we need to replace it and then retest the system. So that's the direction I think I would go. Let me know what you find. But I would definitely test the EGR valve first before pulling it to get time, because we need to see if that works. Because you said it could be bad, but we need to test and confirm it, okay? So I'm going to show you, Kevin. Here's your EGR right here. Here's the exhaust valve going to the intake. Mm-hmm. So an easy test is, before we tear all this down, an easy test for me is if you undo this pipe, which you have another pipe going to the intake, and if you turn this valve on, what should come out?
Exhaust gases?
Exhaust gases, exactly. We need to kind of cap off the manifold side, or this side, with a plug, that plug we have, that orange plug. Mm-hmm. So if we can get this bolt out of here and probably reposition this pipe, all we need is do the test, and this thing should just be spewing out exhaust. That will be the easiest, most quickest way to do it, because you're not touching any of this, you're not disturbing it, because taking it off takes time and it's hot. Right. Let's do that, okay? We got a Prius. What year is this?
12, I think.
12. It's got a EGR P0401, insufficient flow. And what Kevin's doing is, we're trying to find the most logical, easiest path for diagnosis, okay? We're down to the point where we know that there's an issue with the flow of the EGR, just like the code said. What we don't know is it a clog on the cool side, which is the intake side, or is the valve itself defective, where it's not opening up and allowing exhaust gases to go through it and then to the intake? So I'll show you. There's no electrical code, it's just insufficient code. And this is the EGR valve right here. Kevin, real quick, let's take this off and see if that valve is just right there and we can just test it. Does that make sense?
Oh, just those two?
Yeah, let's take a look at that real fast. Well, hold on. Someone's messed with this. Someone's messed with it. They stripped it out. They stripped that Phillips screw. So I think the best bet is going to be what we talked about. Does that make sense? Go from there. I'll be honest with you, you're probably right on this, because most time what happens is the first 2 ports clog, or the 3 clog, and the furthest one away is left open, and it gets a misfire. It misfires really bad because all the exhaust flow gases are going into that one cylinder instead of all 4 equally. Right. So we have no misfires at all. We have 2 things, 2 choices. This thing's just not, it's bad or a restriction, complete restriction, which I find that really hard to believe. I think we're stuck with the flow problem here. So, the other thing is, did this have PIDs for flow? We kind of looked at the map, so map would have saw, there's no flow on this, I can tell you now, because the map would have picked it up. So, the odds of that pipe being clogged is pretty slim. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because even if we had clogged ports in the intake, your map would have been way up, pressure-wise.
Right.
So I think we're on the right path. That let's just take this pipe. Let's just take the pipe off, cap it off with that tube. Those orange. Just throw it in there and twist it. Start it up and do the test again. Confirm it. That's going to be the easiest. Make sense? So we're just coming up with the game plan. What's the easiest direction? What data are we seeing here to get a test? Because you always have to prove it out. You know, what data we saw? What we saw was the PID for the map pressure did not change when he bidirectionally controlled this EGR valve. If the valve was working and functioning, you got exhaust gases going to the intake, it should raise the pressure of the manifold, okay? We did not see that. Let's say you had clogged EGR ports, that pressure is going to still increase, okay? We didn't get that, so what we're going to do is that there's a pipe from the EGR to the intake. We're going to remove that pipe. We're going to block off the intake where the pipe was. Redo the test. Every test you do, you should have the expectations of what you expect. What I expect is, if this valve's good, exhaust gas is coming out of it. If the valve's bad, no gas is coming out of it. So if either thing happens, we know what to expect, we know the answer. So don't do a test unless you know the expected results. Then you can decipher it. Because if you don't know what results mean, you can't decipher it right, you're just kind of doing it for what reason? You're just guessing, you don't know the answers then. Yeah, to get that pipe, you got to pull this off, which is no big deal. But Kevin, we'll get to it. Kevin, how long have you been wrenching on cars for?
Off and on for 25 years. 25
years. He's just newer to my shop. He's been here, I don't know, 6 months, something close to it. He's going to school. He is a military vet. So, guy is dedicated. I mean, he goes to school after work and gets home probably midnight and comes to work at 8. I mean, so he does a fantastic job. So he's a military vet, goes to school, and he has a full-time job. So, and he's married, and he's got kids. I think we found Superman, guys. No, that's impressive. So, Kevin does a good job. The only thing we have here is we're just improving his good habits. We're changing some things, teaching him some things, and then improving certain habits. Because he's been at other shops and they may have done certain things certain ways and may not have been right, but Kevin listens. That's the thing. He's open to changing. What do you have to say about that?
I'm definitely open to changing, doing better.
That's the attitude you have to have. See, most guys that have experience come into a shop that do things right and they've been doing things the wrong way, they don't last. I'll be honest with you, they do not last. But if you come in with the open mind and say, hey, if I've been doing something wrong for a while, I want to know, and I want to know how to do it right, and I want to do it the right way on everything, those guys are going to be awesome. And that's what Kevin's done. Kevin's come in and is like, hey, if I don't do something the right way, let me know. I want to learn. And that's the attitude you have to have in this business. But Kevin does a good job for me.
Thank you. I try.
He does a good job. I mean, sometimes I know when he's tired and like, you need to get some rest, buddy. 'Cause he does a lot. Look at that. I know there's a little bolt right there. So this pipe here, it carries exhaust gases and it goes to the intake to get reburned. It's for emissions, for NOx. It lowers NOx. So what happens is it's inert gas, goes in the intake. It takes up space where fuel and oxygen would be. It's going to be oxygen in this case. It takes a space of oxygen in the cylinder, which lowers the cylinder temp pressure. Because the less oxygen you have in there in the fuel mixture, it's not going to be, the burn's not going to be as hot. Where NOx has problems, really high temperatures in the cylinder creates NOx. That's the byproduct. So, like I said, a byproduct of high combustion cylinders, if I can speak, is NOx. So to combat that, EGRs use. Diesel knows all about that. So, and most manufacturers will use VVT, stuff like that. What do we got here? Bunch of carbon. Nice. Okay, let me see that. You got some. Why does it look right here? Oh, that might be your problem. It's right here. All that carbon. It's completely compact and full in there. So we got to be careful getting it out of there because those are chunks of carbon. I'm going to suggest getting a vacuum cleaner, turn it on, and use a pick and pushing it toward the vacuum cleaner hose so it sucks it out of there. Because you don't want that going through the engine, it can get ingested. So probably going to end up pulling the intake, but I do want to confirm this is good. So, which now we have more data. I'm starting to think we have the restrictions was the problem was, not the valve, but we could have both restriction and a valve problem. So we needed to continue on our testing. Let's go ahead and get a vacuum cleaner. Let's clean this out and we'll put our tube in there and then do our test. So I didn't get time to pull that intake because I'm with you, that intake needs to get pulled off and cleaned up or replaced, whatever the guy wants to do. Because sometimes the labor involved to clean the intake's going to be just as much as it replace the intake. EGR is just a dirty system. So all the byproduct that's left over from the combustion is going through the exhaust. Well, you have leftover fuel in there. I mean, you're not having a complete burn. As it cools down, what happens to it? It turns to carbon, and that carbon is a mess. It gets everywhere. It becomes a restriction at that point. So we're going to clean this up because we don't want this carbon getting sucked into the engine and get ingested. It's pretty nasty. So we're just doing this because let's say, for example, the technician stops right here and says, oh yeah, it's clogged, we're good, we need an intake manifold or I need a cleaning time. Puts it back together, same code. Didn't fix the car. Well, he fixed the restriction, but he didn't finish his testing on the valve. What's the customer going to say? Oh, I just paid you to fix it. All I know is the light's back on the same code, and I paid you money, you didn't fix it. You got to continue testing. If there's more parts of the system, you have to finish your test. We need to prove out this is good or bad. We have to. This is part of the test. That's what the customer is paying for. That's what they're paying you for to diagnose the vehicle. A thorough test. Let me hold that for you. Let me show you spots. Here, come over here. Come over here, buddy. Go by the fender. That stuff is nasty, isn't it? I don't think it's budging out of there, is it? Huh?
Some of it came out.
That big old chunk come out?
Yeah.
That did? You know what I'm talking about? Those little yellow deals?
Yeah, they're part of the that test thing.
I'll go get them. They're from Tifco. I think you got it. All right, I'm gonna go grab the tool that I'm referring to real fast. Yeah, that's a bad sign. You have your data to make sure this thing is being commanded on. So we have the EGR at 84%, which I'll go to 100. And she got nothing. We've tapped it. Nothing's coming out of there, so we got two things going on. We have a restriction in the intake, and we have an EGR valve that's not flowing any exhaust gases, so that would make more sense. So even though if you fix this, you're still gonna have an issue with the intake manifold. So we need to clean the intake manifold, and then we need an EGR valve. Both have been confirmed 100%. So we're done with this, and we're going to call the customer, get approval. And this is that, I'll show you what we use to plug that intake with. So we used, a company called TIFCO. You can take a look what it did. Here's that valve. Pretty nasty, pretty gnarly. So I was gonna get with the customer, see if he wants to just clean this up and reuse it. But someone's been in here, they stripped out the screw. I mean, with the miles on this thing, the best thing is probably to replace it. I'll let the customer make the choice. We still don't know if this works, but it's not gonna function if there's no gases getting to this pintle where it opens and allows it to go through the intake. That's where the flow problem is. The intake was just full of carbon. Toyota's revised the intake, so we are gonna go back with a new revision intake. Could you use the old one and clean it? Yeah, you could. Where is that old one at? Oh, right here. You can kind of see just this crap all in here. It's hard to get out of this plastic. That port's completely clogged. And there's just carbon buildup on this entire thing. Just chunks of carbon in here. Let me see that. I'm gonna see if there's a number on that one, part number. Should be right here. So I'll show you. So the new intake's got a different number on it. It's right here. So the previous number is a 17120-37050. New number is a 17120-37054. What's different about it? It's probably going to be the ports for the EGR is probably a little larger, but it's all internal. Can't really see. Kind of where we're at. But when we tore it down, we saw that cooler completely clogged. So I'm gonna go check on a cooler. So when you're diagnosing something and then you're doing testing, sometimes that test can lead you, you think you're going one way, you go the other way. And this is a prime example on this car airs. So this bolts to the exhaust like this. You have exhaust going through, this is called an EGR cooler, okay? Goes through this here, and this coolant goes through here and here. It cools off the gases, because you have hot gases, the exhaust gases going through here. The coolant cools those gases. It comes out. Let me grab a valve. This valve, which they call EGR valve, sits on there, okay, like so. And this valve, there's a, right there is a pintle that's closed, and see it's full of this carbon. That remains closed until the ECM determines it needs to open up. So it energizes this solenoid right here. It retracts that pintle, and exhaust gases come out here, and then it goes through a tube that goes to the intake. That's how this system works, okay? It's all emission related. Well, when we're testing it, we're turning on this valve, but no exhaust gases coming out. So we thought possibly this valve was faulty. And we took off the pipe and we saw how much carbon was in the intake, so we knew there was a pretty good restriction there. So we thought this was faulty, and it may still be. But when we took this off, we looked in there and this thing was just full of carbon. So I was like, we got to take this off, because if this is not allowing any gases to go through this, this has no gases to go through it. So obviously they wouldn't have anything coming out of it. But this thing has quite a bit of miles on it, I think over 200,000. And I talked to the customer, we try to clean this, I don't have anything to clean this properly that I would feel comfortable that this would be back to, flowing gases freely through it. So we have a cooler coming. No one had it in stock. Toyota didn't stock it. So I talked to customers, hey, what do you want to do with this valve? This valve, we can clean this up right here. Someone's already, messed with this valve right here, I could see, because it's got the Phillips head is stripped out. I say, this could work. We clean this off, could work just fine. Or while we're here, we have it off. Do you want to go back with a new one? He elected to go with the new one, okay? And we could be also, if he says, hey, I wanted to see if it works, yeah, we'll put it on there, retest it. If it works, and if you want to go back to this, we could. But his choice. Same thing with the intake. I gave him an option. Do you want me to clean this intake, or do you want the new revised intake? And he says, give me the new revised intake. So that's what we're doing here. So we're going to have a new cooler, new EGR valve, and a new intake. And you can see how the emissions, what it does to a system over time, it becomes a pretty costly repair. These parts from Toyota are not cheap. This is after tax $500. After tax, I think it's 400 bucks. After tax, 3 something. So I mean, it adds up, and you have labor in here. So you can see how the carbon affects everything. It clogged this. It's clogged this pretty good, and it's clogged the ports in here. It's a byproduct of this system, the EGR system, all 4 emissions, NOx. So nitrous oxide is what it is. So Toyota is one of the few manufacturers that actually use it. I think manufacturers are going back to it. Diesel has it on their vehicles. A lot of vehicles don't utilize EGR unless it's probably a California model or something like that. You don't see it very often. It just adds a lot more expense to the labor when you do a job, because this stuff's got to come off. Plus it fails. I mean, it's not an instant fail. It's a slow degrade over time. But this is stuff you run into when you're doing DIAG. Is you could have one component that's cause failure to the other. In this case, it's the exhaust gas. This is cause a failure to this and that. So over time, it degrades. But that's kind of where we're at on this one. Unfortunately, I won't finish it today because we don't have the parts. I do have this, and the intake's been replaced already. So anyways, that's what happens when you get into repairing cars. It can lead you to something, and you think it's one direction, and you go backwards. So follow the steps. Let the data answer all your questions, because the data will answer the questions, I promise you. But we're going to finish this up. Until the next video. See ya!